we all are also seeing that these platforms can't regulate themselves. We've tried that, and it's simply not working. Now, there's a big difference between saying that we're going to regulate these hateful things and these appalling things, and we're going to put an end to free speech on the internet. That's really not what this is about. Just like we have free speech in our society, but people can't say everything. You can't verbally abuse someone. We have courts that have put measures around free speech. Well, we're doing it in the real world. We can do it on the virtual world as well. And then this is something that myself, my colleague Minister Baines, obviously Justice Minister Lametti are working on, and we will be coming up with legislation in the very near future.
That is Steven Guilbeault, the only member of Trudeau's cabinet who's actually a convicted criminal, saying he thinks it's about time that the internet was regulated and subjected to laws against abuse or crimes. I guess no one told him that it already is. The same laws that apply to a printing press and a TV station and a radio wave also apply to the internet when it comes to anything like uttering a death threat or defamation. In fact, these days, most litigation about the content of news isn't against a TV station or a newspaper, it's online. I think that Steven Guilbeault is one of the dumber members of the cabinet, and that's fine. I mean, you can't all be as bright as Justin Trudeau and Catherine McKenna. They explain the hard parts to Steven Guilbeault. But what troubles me is that I think most of the media are letting Guilbeault get away with this. He's claiming that the internet is not now regulated. Oh, don't worry about free speech, he says. You'll still have it when I'm done. Well, joining us now to talk about this latest emanation from Steven Guilbeault is our friend Andrew Lawton, a grand poobah over there at True North, along with our friend Candace Malcolm, Anthony Fury, and other great guys. Hey, good to see you, Andrew.
Hey, I don't know if I'm the grand poobah, but I'll say I am a poobah.
You know what? As soon as I said grand poobah, I thought I'd better throw in Candace because she's the super grand poobah, but you're one of the
There we go,
poobahs.
yeah. Well, she's super grand. I can just be grand.
She's the best. We're her #1 fans, and we sure like you too, Andrew. Anyhow, let me put that admiration society where everyone knows I'm a fan of the True North. But let's get down to today's crazy subject, which is Steven Guilbeault. And I was poking fun at how dopey he is, but that's not actually the first time he's sort of muddled into a half-baked plan to censor the internet, has it?
No, not at all. And in fact, this comes just less than half a year, I think, after he walked back a comment he had made in an interview where he was talking about how he would seek to force social media companies to have a license, or digital publishers to be a license. And this got a lot of people in the media to be quite critical because it sounded like, from how he worded it, like he could be going after the media. But then once he had said, oh, no, we're not actually talking about the media, the mainstream media really stopped covering the story, and they stopped asking any further questions about who would be licensed to have the right to free speech in Steven Guilbeault's ideal world.
Yeah, we've got that clip. It seems like a decade ago because it was before the pandemic. The fact that they're bringing this idea back during the pandemic suggests they'd like to pass it with a little less scrutiny, a little less parliamentary oversight. I find it dangerous. Here's a flashback to that utterance that you referred to from what seems like ages ago, but is actually measured in months. Take a look.
Yeah, but sir, to be fair, you've got an agency that wants to enhance its scope of powers to determine what's a trusted news source. So the first question will be, who's to define that? You've got a lot of these groups.
This is a recommendation, Evan.
Okay,
it's
no, but they
the CRTC hasn't decided.
Okay,
anything.
but they're recommending that. They're recommending that content providers have to register and get a license. So how will this work? How are you going to regulate websites? How are you going to register all that? Do you buy these recommendations?
Well, one of the recommendations, so you're talking about a couple of different things here, but as far as the licensing is concerned, is if you're a distributor of content in Canada, and obviously, you know, if you're a very small media organization, the requirement probably wouldn't be the same as if you're Facebook or Google, so there would have to be some proportionality embedded into this, but we would ask that they have a license. Yes, just like right now, but with the old system in Canada, distributors needed to go to the CRTC and to have a license.
Andrew, so that's what he said months ago, but it looks like they're coming back. And he still believes the internet is not governed by laws, by civil lawsuits like defamation, by criminal lawsuits like prosecutions over hate crimes or uttering death threats. I think Steven Guilbeault, who's a lifelong environmental extremist, he was actually convicted of crimes for that. I don't think he's much of a scholar or a lawyer or a book reader, because I think he actually doesn't know that the internet is governed by the criminal law and the civil law, just like every other part of our lives is.
Yeah, this is a profound exercise in gaslighting, convincing Canadians that a problem that doesn't exist does, so that people will go along with whatever proposed remedy we hear about from the government. And may I remind your viewers, if they aren't already aware, back when I used to work in Ottawa, for example, the Heritage Minister used to be all about arts and culture, and it was, generally speaking, a job that sure had some more contentious areas, but was really about a lot of things that were not what it is now, which is like the chief bastion of censorship in the government. And ultimately, when Steven Guilbeault gets up there and he starts talking about licensing and regulation and all of this, this has been, for the most part, the only portfolio on which he has been focused since assuming the job of Heritage Minister. So you have to listen very carefully when he starts to talk about all of these things. He had said in that interview, quote, "We can do it in the virtual world as well." Again, trying to convince people that the law doesn't apply on the internet. And even if certain aspects of the Heritage Code don't apply, for example, the CRTC isn't regulating at this point Netflix or Crave like they are television and radio stations, that doesn't mean that these extremist rhetoric examples and other forms of hate speech and all of these things that are under the criminal code right now don't extend to the internet. If it's illegal to say something on your front lawn, it's illegal to say it in the parking lot of a Denny's, and it's illegal to say it online. So this idea that we have this area of the world in which the law doesn't apply is just plain wrong. But the Liberals are trying to deceive Canadians to justify putting in these sweeping things that would curb speech and force big tech to curb speech.
Yeah. You know, I've been reading a lot about what Steven Guilbeault says, and he always starts off with something no one could disagree with. We have to crack down on terrorism recruitment. Okay, yeah, I totally agree with that. And actual crimes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then he immediately switches to political mean words. So he always leads with the stuff that even a conservative would say, yeah, let's not let ISIS recruit online. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's crack down, as if Facebook, YouTube, Google aren't actually right now trying their hardest to stop that. I know for a fact that they are, certainly more than Justin Trudeau, who just lets them back into Canada. So he starts with the stuff we can all agree in, and then very cleverly, he slips his rhetoric, his vocabulary towards mean tweets, mean comments, untrusted news sources, disinformation. He's not talking about terrorists anymore. He's not talking about death threats anymore. He's talking about True North, Rebel News, or any voice he doesn't agree with. He's a slippery fish, this Steven Guilbeault.
Yeah, and the context of this is it's coming at a time where Rebel and True North, to name two examples that you just brought up, are fighting in court for the right to cover elections. This case from the previous election campaign is still going on against the Leaders Debates Commission, and that's an area where, again, for all this talk about the need to, in his words, not regulate news and media, well, his government is doing that effectively by barring certain media from having their constitutionally protected right to freedom of the press and free speech. And the problem we have here with Guilbeault is that he is using licensing and regulation as kind of a catch-all for everything. So just last week or 2 weeks ago, he had said he supported what the Australian government was trying to do, which was actually forcing private social media companies to pay media for the right for people like you or I to post links to those stories online. Something very convoluted, something that, again, it impacts the right of people using social media platforms more than it affects social media platforms. And you look further than that, he's talked in the past about licensing digital publishers without really explaining who is supposed to be affected by that. I was in Ottawa back in June of 2019 when there were ongoing hearings on the Heritage Committee, on the Justice and Human Rights Committee about whether to bring back a supercharged version of the Section 13 provision of the Human Rights Act that you and countless others fought tooth and nail to defeat. And that committee's report ultimately recommended that there needs to be greater protections against what they call hate speech from social media companies. And this report didn't go anywhere because the 2019 election happened. The reason I bring that up is because this government has actually tried to deputize social media companies to become the arbiters of what is hate speech and what is extremist speech and all of that. And now that we hear it coming back in this context, this is very dangerous, because now all of a sudden you have the government threatening social media companies, but getting the social media companies to do the actual censorship.
Right. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.